I'm just looking at the book behind you, the Candy Calamity. This is your new kids book. A really important theme in it, and I think it's incredibly important at this time in history, is personal responsibility. It's just not something a lot of kids are being taught. They're not being taught that they need to take responsibility for themselves. So thank you for a children's book that actually does that. But this personal responsibility has become something that's almost like a question. Like it's like someone else is supposed to take the responsibility. Is it the government? Is it the people, the privileged people? Is it So what are your thoughts?
Sure. I think that personal responsibility is another thing that has been sadly eroded over the course of the last few decades with society and culture. I mean, I think on a deeper, more philosophical level, I think this stems from various forms of thought in academia which promote the notion that human beings are somehow perfectible, right? They reject the notion of any type of original sin or religious thinking, and the idea is that human beings are these sort of blank slates and we're simply products of our environment. So if someone commits a crime or somebody does something that's bad or wrong, it's purely because of environmental and social factors, and if we just had this thing in the right place, then that person wouldn't have done it. It almost goes against this idea of free will.
This deterministic.
Yeah, it's this deterministic kind of situation that, if someone is born into these conditions or they grow up in these conditions, then they have no control over their outcome, and it's just a result. And I think this is an attractive thought. Number one, because it allows people to deny personal responsibility, but also because there's some truth in it, but they make it absolutist, right? We all recognize that the environment that you grow up in and your family situation and the level of poverty or crime around you or certain role models around you or whatever, we understand all of these things can influence and impact people's behavior. Human beings can absolutely be influenced. That's what we've been discussing. But you do have, I believe people do have free will, and you do make your own choices. You don't choose the cards you're dealt, but you can choose how you play the hand, especially over the course of multiple decades. I'd tell, the situation you're born into, you have zero control over. The parents you're born to, no control. The country you're born in, no control. The time period you're born into, you have no control. You have no control over your genetics, all that. We have no control. But where you end up over the long course of time, that is largely up to you. Even not completely. There's random variables in there. There's people who, you could be in good health and take care of your health, and you could still get cancer. You could still get a random heart attack, right? Like there are many things that we are not totally in control of. So I'm a big advocate for the things which we are to take control and take responsibility of that. There are all these random variables. There are all these environmental factors and so on. But the one thing we can control, I can only control myself and my response and reactions to things. I can control my choices. I have control of that. No one else does, not the government, not even my parents and my family, not anyone I know, my friends, my acquaintances. I have control of that. Just like I pick what foods I want to eat on a daily basis, I have the control of many other more important decisions. And the message to me about personal responsibility is, number one, it's one of reality. And number two, it's actually a very empowering message. Because as I've said, there are so many things that we cannot control, and that can feel disempowering, right? It can feel disempowering to not be able to control every single aspect. We certainly can't control other people and all of their decisions and so on, but it's empowering. It should be empowering to people to go, hey, you know what? Like, despite all that, I've got that certain control over my body, and I can act as a force in the world to make good decisions and make wise decisions, which will lead to an increase in my own happiness and other people's happiness and my ability and my potential and what I'm trying to orient myself towards in a personal direction. And if I want to have a family, the family I come from and the family that you go on and create, all of that, it's like amazing. You've got great control over that. So this is a message that I wish were pushed more. I think we talk too much now in the West about rights and not enough about responsibility. And talking about rights is really important. I talk about rights a lot, but you always have to couple it with responsibility, because with every right comes a responsibility. And I think there's so much focus on that first part. I have a right to do this. I have a right to do that. This is my right. Me, 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 me. It's really narcissistic and immature. And people then reject the idea that there's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think it's also dangerous to disregard that, because if you don't, then that power will be outsourced elsewhere. It will be outsourced to the state. It will be outsourced to somebody else who can then have control over you and manipulate you and do your bidding. But the rights part only works with the responsibility part. And this goes for many issues, hot button topics here in the USA even. There's lots of control right now about guns, gun rights, right? I support the Second Amendment. Most British people probably don't. I support the Second Amendment. But if you are a gun owner, if you have a right to own a firearm, and you have a responsibility, a big responsibility, actually, that comes with that, right? If you want to just talk about us as human beings, as a species that reproduces, and we all have the capacity and ability to reproduce and a right to reproduce, you've got to be careful with that, right? You've got to be smart. You have to make good decisions.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/free trial Jan. That's ept.ms/free trial JAN. You were talking about your support of the Second Amendment. I can't help but remembering that, you yourself were at one point taken down by the equivalent of something like a SWAT team in a case of mistaken identity. And some people might wonder, like, in this situation, you weren't treated well. Mm-hmm. And when you have a situation which a lot of people today would say, is terrible and representative of the bad way our society has gone, how could you support the Second Amendment?
If that's the way someone thinks of it, they should support it even more, because that was the police that did that. So if people are thinking that the police are the problem, or that the police can't be relied on to protect their lives and other people, then to me that sounds like an argument in favor of a Second Amendment. I've never even viewed my situation through that lens, but if anything, that would have been an outcome that comes of it. In terms of that particular incident, though, it's not something I really think about that much. What happened was, it was a case of I'd been out promoting my music one day. I came back home. I was at a train station, and there was a mistaken identity case. They thought I was somebody I wasn't. They thought I was someone who'd threatened someone with a firearm in a city I hadn't even been to that day. And 2 firearm units were dispatched to stop the train and arrest me. So that was a very strange situation on multiple levels. But there were many lessons taken from it. But I don't generally, number one, I don't like to get hung up on any type of victimhood narrative. Like, it would be easy for me in the many years after that to kind of perceive myself as some kind of victim of injustice or something, which I, temporarily was in that case. That was an injustice. It's not something that should have happened, nor something that was fair, because I hadn't done anything wrong. But I'm here, life goes on. As I said earlier, you can't control every random thing that happens to you, and sometimes sucky things just happen, but you can control how you react and respond, right? If I'd made a really stupid reaction, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, right? So even if you do find yourself in that type of situation, my most important takeaway I could say to anyone is, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you've got guns pointed at you and police arresting you for something that you have not done, and you have no idea what's going on, comply. Just comply and stay alive